Red and blue lights shatter the darkness of a lonely midnight highway. A badge is supposed to be a shield, but tonight it's a weapon. Officer Greg Harrelson thought he was pulling over just another easy target to extort. He had no idea he just handcuffed his worst nightmare. The rain was coming down in sheets across Roosevelt Boulevard, slicking the Philadelphia asphalt into a mirror of neon reflections. It was 1:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour when the city's ghosts and predators roamed freely. Inside a battered 2014 Ford Taurus, Arthur Pendleton kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands perfectly positioned, at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. He was a 42-year-old black man in a faded grey hoodie, driving a car that looked like it had survived 3 different owners. To the untrained eye, Arthur was just a tired warehouse worker trying to get home. But Arthur wasn't heading home, and he wasn't a warehouse worker. In the trunk of the Taurus rested a black canvas gym bag. Inside that bag was exactly $15,000 in banded marked $100 bills. It was bait. 3 car lengths behind him, emerging from the shadow of an underpass, the silhouette of a police cruiser crept into the glow of the streetlights. Car 34. Arthur recognized the vehicle number in his rearview mirror. His heart rate remained completely steady, hovering at a calm 65 beats per minute. He had spent months profiling the men inside that cruiser. Behind the wheel of Car 34 sat Officer Greg Harrelson, a 12-year veteran of the 12th Precinct. Harrelson had a reputation on the streets, a reputation for turning traffic stops into personal payday operations. Beside him sat his partner, Officer Tyler Jenkins, a fresh-faced rookie, barely 6 months out of the academy, who had quickly learned that in the 12th Precinct you kept your mouth shut and followed the senior man's lead. Arthur lightly tapped his brakes, ensuring he was going exactly 3 miles under the speed limit. He watched the cruiser accelerate aggressively, riding his bumper. Harrelson was running the plates. The Taurus was registered to an alias intentionally given a clean but financially vulnerable profile. Suddenly, the cruiser's light bar exploded into a blinding flash of crimson and sapphire. The siren gave a short, aggressive wail. Arthur activated his turn signal, smoothly pulling the Taurus onto the gravel shoulder of the rain-swept boulevard. He shifted into park, turned on the dome, light rolled down his window, and placed both hands flat on the steering wheel. The performance was about to begin. In his side mirror, Arthur watched Harrelson step out of the cruiser. The officer didn't bother with a raincoat. He was a large, heavy-set man with a thick neck and a permanent scowl, walking with the swagger of a man who believed he owned the pavement. Jenkins approached the passenger side, hanging back, his hand resting nervously on his utility belt. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Harrelson barked, shining his heavy tactical flashlight directly into Arthur's eyes. Arthur squinted perfectly, feigning a tremor of anxiety. "Yes, sir. My wallet is in my back right pocket. My registration is in the glove box. Is it all right if I reach for them?" "Make it slow." Harrelson growled, his hand resting casually on the butt of his sidearm. Arthur moved with exaggerated caution, producing the requested documents and handing them through the rain-streaked window. Harrelson snatched them, barely glancing at the names, before shining the light around the interior of the Taurus. "Do you know why I pulled you over, Arthur?" Harrelson asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "No, officer. I was going under the speed limit," Arthur said, his voice carrying just the right pitch of nervous compliance. "You crossed the solid yellow line back on Broad Street." Harrelson lied smoothly. "Swerving. Looks to me like you might be driving under the influence." "I haven't had a drop to drink, sir. I'm just coming off a double shift," Arthur pleaded. Harrelson leaned in closer, his heavy breath carrying the faint scent of stale coffee and peppermint. "I'll be the judge of that. Step out of the vehicle." Arthur didn't argue. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out into the freezing rain. Before he could even turn around, Harrelson grabbed him roughly by the shoulder and slammed him against the side of the Taurus, kicking his legs apart. "Hey, what are you doing?" Arthur cried out, letting a note of genuine-sounding panic slip into his voice. "Shut your mouth! Stop resisting!" Harrelson shouted. Out of the corner of his eye, Arthur noticed a critical detail. The red blinking light on Harrelson's chest-mounted body camera was completely dark. The officer had manually deactivated it before stepping out of the cruiser. Jenkins's camera across the car was obscured by his jacket. Harrelson patted Arthur down aggressively, his heavy hands searching for anything he could use. Finding no weapons, Harrelson stepped back. "Jenkins, keep an eye on him. I'm searching the vehicle. I smell marijuana." "There's no marijuana in there. I don't smoke," Arthur protested. "You can't search my car without a warrant." Harrelson chuckled a dark, raspy sound over the pouring rain. "Probable cause, Arthur. I smell weed. That gives me all the permission I need." Arthur stood shivering in the rain, guarded by the silent, uncomfortable rookie, while Harrelson tore apart the interior of the Taurus. He tossed the glovebox contents onto the passenger seat, ripped up the floor mats, and finally popped the trunk. Arthur watched Jenkins closely. The young cop looked away, staring at the wet pavement, deeply ashamed, but too cowardly to intervene. "Well, well, well!" Harrelson's voice boomed from the back of the car. He slammed the trunk shut and walked back over to Arthur, holding the black canvas gym bag. He unzipped it, pulling out a thick stack of banded $100 bills. "Warehouse worker, huh?" Harrelson sneered, slapping the stack of cash against his palm. "Looks to me like we've got a major narcotics distributor on our hands." "Where'd you steal this, Arthur?" "That's my savings," Arthur begged, leaning into the role of a desperate civilian. "It's $15,000. I'm driving it down to Maryland tomorrow to pay for my mother's surgery. The clinic only takes cash up front. Please, you can check the bank withdrawal slips in my wallet." "I don't care about your fake bank slips," Harrelson said, his eyes gleaming with sheer greed. "This is suspected drug proceeds. Under civil asset forfeiture laws, this money is being seized as evidence." "You're stealing from me," Arthur yelled, perfectly calculating the volume to escalate the situation. "That's my mother's life. You can't just take it." Harrelson's face flushed with anger. He shoved Arthur hard against the car. "I can do whatever the hell I want, boy. In fact, since you're being so uncooperative." Harrelson pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around. You're under arrest for assaulting a police officer, resisting arrest and suspicion of narcotics trafficking." As the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around Arthur's wrists, biting into his skin, a small hidden microphone stitched into the collar of his hoodie captured every single word. The trap hadn't just been set. The predator had walked right in and locked the door behind him. The ride to the 12th precinct was suffocatingly tense. Arthur sat rigidly in the molded plastic back seat of the cruiser, his hands cuffed awkwardly behind his back. The rain lashed against the windows, distorting the passing streetlights into abstract streaks of color. In the front seat, Harrelson was in a dangerously good mood. He had placed the black canvas bag of cash on the center console, practically treating it like a trophy. Jenkins drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "See, Tyler, this is what proactive policing looks like," Harrelson lectured, tapping the bag. "If we hadn't stopped this piece of garbage, this dirty money would be back on the streets funding gang wars. Now it's going to fund some much-needed precinct upgrades." "Right." Jenkins swallowed hard. "Yeah, Greg, proactive." "And you saw him lunge at me, right?" Harrelson pressed his tone, leaving no room for argument. "When I asked him to step out of the car, he aggressively shoved me. That's battery on a sworn officer." Jenkins glanced at Harrelson, then at the rear-view mirror, making brief eye contact with Arthur. Arthur kept his expression terrified and defeated. I saw him shove you." Jenkins lied, sealing his own fate as an accomplice. Arthur mentally catalogued the confession: conspiracy to commit perjury, filing a false police report, grand larceny, and civil rights violations under Title 18, Section 242. The list of federal and state charges against Harrelson was growing by the minute, and Jenkins was foolishly anchoring himself to a sinking ship. The cruiser pulled into the gated underground garage of the 12th Precinct. The building was a brutalist block of concrete from the 1970s, smelling perpetually of stale cigarettes, bleach, and misery. It was notorious within the city as a black hole where complaints disappeared and evidence frequently went missing. Harrelson hauled Arthur out of the back seat by his collar, dragging him toward the heavy steel doors of the booking area. Desk Sergeant O'Malley, a balding man with permanent bags under his eyes, looked up from a crossword puzzle as they hauled Arthur in. "What do we have here, Harrelson?" O'Malley grunted, barely looking at Arthur. "Got a live one, Sarge." Harrelson grinned, tossing Arthur's driver's license on the high wooden desk. "Arthur Pendleton. Traffic stop escalated. He caught a nasty attitude, shoved me. And guess what we found in the trunk? A heavy bag of suspected cartel cash. I'm booking him for assault resisting and holding him for narcotics detectives to grill tomorrow." O'Malley's eyes darted to the black gym bag Harrelson had slung over his shoulder. A silent, knowing look passed between the two veterans. "Cartel cash, huh?" O'Malley smirked. "Must be dangerous evidence. Better make sure it gets counted properly in the back room before it goes into the locker." "Exactly what I was thinking, Sarge." Harrelson laughed. "Throw this mutt in cell 4. I don't want to look at him any more tonight." Jenkins processed Arthur's fingerprints and mugshot in utter silence. Once the physical processing was done, Jenkins escorted Arthur down a dimly lit, damp concrete hallway lined with iron-barred cages. The precinct was mostly empty at this hour, save for a drunk sleeping off a bender 2 cells down. Jenkins opened the heavy iron door of cell 4. "In." Arthur stepped inside. As Jenkins moved to close the door, Arthur turned, dropping the terrified civilian act for just a fraction of a second. He looked Jenkins dead in the eye, his gaze sharp, piercing, and entirely devoid of fear. "You don't have to go down with him, Tyler," Arthur said quietly, his voice entirely different, calm, authoritative, and chilling. Jenkins froze his hand, trembling on the iron bars. He stared at Arthur, confused by the sudden shift in demeanor, before his training kicked back in. He slammed the door shut and locked it without a word, hurrying back down the hallway. Alone in the cell, Arthur sat on the cold steel bench. The air was frigid. He stretched his neck, feeling the stiffness from the fake scuffle. Then he reached into the inner lining of his left shoe. Harrelson's search had been aggressive, but sloppy. He had entirely missed the small encrypted satellite phone, secured perfectly in the hollowed arch of Arthur's boot. Arthur pulled it out, turning his back to the security camera mounted in the corner of the hallway, which he knew was likely broken anyway. He dialed a secure, unlisted number. It rang twice. "Director Hayes," a crisp professional voice answered. "It's Pendleton," Arthur whispered, keeping his eyes on the hallway. "Status Arthur. The package has been delivered to the 12th. Harrelson took the bait completely. He seized the marked bills, deactivated his body cam, and hit me with a fabricated assault charge. He's counting the money right now with Desk Sergeant O'Malley. Officer Jenkins is complicit." A heavy sigh came through the receiver. "We suspected O'Malley was the fence for the stolen cash. This confirms it. Are you safe in the cell? I'm fine, but we need to move before sunrise." Arthur instructed, his tone shifting into that of a commanding officer. "Harrelson is arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. If we wait too long, they'll disperse the marked bills into their private accounts. I want the tactical raid initiated at 0600 hours. Have the FBI Anti-Corruption Task Force lock down the perimeter. No one goes in or out of this precinct once the sun comes up. Understood, Arthur. We have the audio feed from your wire. The warrants are being signed by the federal judge as we speak. Sit tight. Tomorrow morning, the 12th precinct gets gutted. Make sure Captain Miller is named on the warrant, too, Arthur added coldly. A precinct doesn't get this rotten unless the man at the top is watering the weeds. Done. See you at dawn, Pendleton. Arthur ended the call and slipped the phone back into his shoe. He leaned back against the freezing concrete wall, crossed his arms, and listened to the distant, muffled laughter of Officer Harrelson down the hall. Laugh while you can, Greg Arthur thought to himself, staring at the rusted iron bars of his cage. Because tomorrow these bars are going to be yours. At 5:45 a.m., the 12th precinct was a tomb of silence, save for the rhythmic dripping of a leaky pipe in the basement and the low hum of the vending machine in the break room. Inside that break room, the harsh, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating a scene of casual corruption. Officer Greg Harrelson and Desk Sergeant O'Malley sat across from each other at a scarred folding table. Between them sat Arthur's black canvas gym bag. The $15,000 had been removed from its bank bands and laid out in neat, crisp piles. "I've got to hand it to you, Greg," O'Malley said, taking a slow sip from a styrofoam cup of black coffee. "This is the cleanest seizure we've had in months. No gang affiliations attached to the driver. No local heavyweight looking for his missing drop. Just a scared nobody who thought he could transport cartel cash through our sector." Harrelson chuckled, his heavy hands expertly dividing the stacks. "The guy was shaking like a leaf. Tried to tell me it was for his mother's surgery. He played the victim perfectly, but I know a mule when I see one. We book him for assault, let him sit in county for the weekend, and by Monday he'll be so terrified of the narcotics charges, he'll sign a waiver, surrendering the cash without a fight." "And the rookie?" O'Malley asked, tilting his head toward the door. "Jenkins, he's fine. The kid knows how the bread is buttered," Harrelson sneered. "He backed up my story about the assault. Once he takes his cut today, he's in the club. He'll never squeal." Out in the main bullpen, Officer Tyler Jenkins was not fine. He sat at his desk, staring blankly at the arrest report glowing on his computer monitor. His hands were clammy, and a knot of profound dread had anchored itself in his stomach. He kept replaying the moment in the cell the way Arthur Pendleton had dropped the terrified civilian act, looking at him with eyes that felt like they belonged to a predator, not prey. "You don't have to go down with him, Tyler." The words echoed in his skull. Jenkins had joined the force to protect his community, but in 6 short months, Harrelson had twisted him into a complicit thug. The digital clock on the wall flipped to 5:59 a.m. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving a heavy fog rolling through the Philadelphia streets. Block by block, a convoy of 6 unmarked matte black SUVs cut their headlights as they silently surrounded the 12th precinct. Dozens of heavily armed men and women in tactical gear stepped out into the damp morning air. Emblazoned across their tactical vests in bold yellow lettering were the acronyms FBI and Internal Affairs. Leading the charge was Special Agent Thomas Reed, a veteran of the Bureau's Public Corruption Unit, working directly with the state police. He carried a breaching ram, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. At exactly 6 a.m., the glass double doors of the precinct were violently yanked open. "Federal agents! Nobody move hands in the air right now!" Agent Reed roared, his voice echoing through the concrete lobby like a thunderclap. Jenkins jumped out of his chair, instinctively reaching for his sidearm before freezing. A red laser dot painted his chest. "Hands away from the belt, officer! Do it now!" a tactical agent screamed. Jenkins immediately raised his hands, his knees trembling. A wave of immense relief washed over him. The nightmare was ending, even if it meant his own ruin. In the break room, Harrelson and O'Malley froze. The sound of heavy combat boots stamping across the linoleum floor sounded like an invading army. "What the hell is that?" O'Malley whispered, his face turning pale. Before Harrelson could stand, the break room door was kicked open. 3 agents poured into the small space, their weapons leveled directly at the 2 corrupt cops. "Don't even breathe," Agent Reed commanded, stepping into the room. He took one look at the piles of cash on the table and offered a grim smile. "Well, well, caught with your hands in the cookie jar. Step away from the table, both of you." Harrelson's face flushed scarlet with indignation. His legendary arrogance refused to let him submit. "What is this?" "Are you out of your mind, Reed? We're securing evidence. We pulled a major narcotics mule off the street last night, and we're cataloguing the seizure. You have no jurisdiction to bust in here like this." Cataloguing evidence in the break room, Greg without an evidence log at 6 in the morning, Reed asked mockingly. "Save it for the judge. Cuff them." 2 agents moved forward aggressively, pinning Harrelson and O'Malley against the cinderblock wall. As the cold steel of federal handcuffs clamped around Harrelson's wrists, his mind raced. How did they know? Who tipped them off? "You're making a massive mistake," Harrelson spat as an agent patted him down. "The guy in holding Arthur Pendleton. He's the criminal. Check his trunk. Check his plates. You're protecting a cartel mule." Reed ignored him, tapping his earpiece. "Secure the perimeter. No one leaves. Send a team up to Captain Miller's office. I have a federal warrant for his arrest signed by Judge Eleanor Wyatt herself. And someone get the keys to the holding cells." Harrelson laughed bitterly. "You want to talk to Pendleton? Go ahead. He's in cell 4, but you're going to look like a damn fool when you realize you're raiding a precinct over a lawful arrest." "Let's go see him then," Reed said calmly. The agents dragged Harrelson and O'Malley out of the break room, parading them through the bullpen. Jenkins was already sitting on the floor, his hands zip-tied behind his back, staring at the floor in shame. The entire precinct had been locked down in less than 90 seconds. Reed led the procession down the damp, dimly lit hallway toward the holding cells. The heavy iron door to cell 4 was securely locked. Inside, Arthur Pendleton was standing perfectly still, his hands resting casually in the pockets of his faded grey hoodie. He didn't look like a terrified warehouse worker anymore. He looked entirely in command. An IA agent used the desk keys to unlock the cell. The iron door swung open with a heavy groan. "Good morning, Arthur," Agent Reed said, his tone entirely shifting from hostile to deeply respectful. "Sorry about the accommodations. Are you injured?" "I'm fine, Tom," Arthur replied, stepping out of the cell. He stretched his shoulders completely, ignoring Harrelson for a moment. "Just a bruised ego and a little stiffness. The raid was on time." Harrelson stopped struggling against the agents holding him. His jaw went slack. He looked back and forth between Agent Reed and the man he had arrested just hours ago. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What is this?" Harrelson stammered, his voice losing all its bravado. "Reed, you know this guy. He's a suspect." Arthur slowly turned to face Harrelson. The facade of the helpless civilian was entirely stripped away, replaced by the chilling, clinical gaze of an apex predator who had just cornered his prey. Arthur reached under the collar of his hoodie and pulled out a small metallic object attached to a wire, snapping it free. "Arthur Pendleton, lead investigator, State Police Internal Affairs, Anti-Corruption Unit." Arthur said, his voice ringing with absolute authority. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold detective's shield, flashing it directly in Harrelson's face. "You didn't arrest a mule last night, Greg. You arrested your own executioner. The silence in the holding corridor was absolute. The realization hit Harrelson like a physical blow to the chest. The isolated traffic stop, the perfectly bundled cash, the lack of a dash cam on the Taurus. It was a flawlessly orchestrated sting operation, and he had swallowed the hook whole. "You set me up," Harrelson whispered, his face turning a sickly shade of grey. "This is entrapment. Entrapment requires me to coerce you into committing a crime," Arthur replied smoothly, closing the distance until he was inches from Harrelson's face. "I didn't force you to turn off your body camera. I didn't force you to invent a bogus assault charge. And I certainly didn't force you to steal $15,000 to split with your desk sergeant." O'Malley, standing nearby in handcuffs, began to sweat profusely. "I had nothing to do with the stop Harrelson brought the bag in. I was just verifying the count." Arthur smiled a cold, clinical smile. "Is that right, Sergeant? Then you won't mind if we check your hands." Arthur gestured to Agent Reed, who pulled a specialized ultraviolet flashlight from his tactical vest. "The bait money wasn't just marked with sequential serial numbers," Arthur explained, his voice echoing off the cold concrete. "Before we placed it in the trunk, every single bill was dusted with an invisible fluorescent tracking compound. It binds aggressively to the oils in human skin." Reed clicked the UV light on, plunging the dim hallway into a harsh purple hue. He swept the beam over Harrelson's hands. They glowed with a brilliant, undeniable neon green. Reed then stepped over to O'Malley. The sergeant's fingertips and palms were glowing just as brightly in the dark. "Looks like you were doing a very thorough verification of that cash, Sergeant," Arthur noted dryly. Harrelson's heavy frame sagged against the federal agents. His career, his pension, and his freedom were evaporating before his eyes. "You wore a wire," he muttered. "A wire, a GPS tracker, and we hacked your precinct's internal security feeds at midnight. We watched you both salivate over that money in the break room. It's airtight, Greg. You're looking at 20 years. Down the hall, a commotion erupted as IA agents escorted Captain Miller out of his office in handcuffs. The rot went all the way to the top, and the precinct was being gutted. Arthur walked past the defeated veterans to the bullpen, where Officer Jenkins sat on the floor, zip-tied, and crying silently. Arthur knelt, his voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a stern pity. "Tyler," Arthur said softly, "I read your academy file. You wanted to do good work, but you got placed in a snake pit and decided to slither with them instead of standing up." Jenkins sobbed. "I was so scared of him. You lied on an official report. That's a felony. You will never wear a badge again," Arthur stated bluntly. "However, the DA is offering a deal. Testify against Harrelson, O'Malley, and Miller. Give us every illegal shakedown from the last 6 months, and you get probation. You start over as a civilian." Jenkins looked up, desperate hope shining through his tears. "I'll give you everything. I promise." Agent Reed walked over, handing Arthur his actual wallet. "Hell of a job, Pendleton." "Just another night, Tom," Arthur said. He zipped up his hoodie and stepped out of the brutalist concrete building. The morning rain had finally stopped washing the city clean and leaving the streets just a little bit safer. When those sworn to protect us become the very monsters we fear, it takes true courage to step into the darkness and expose them. Arthur Pendleton proved that no badge can shield you from the consequences of absolute greed. Did you see the twist coming? If you were on the edge of your seat during this takedown, like this video, share it with your friends to spread the thrill and hit that subscribe button for more incredible true-to-life crime stories.